Look, the three previous speakers in different ways have alluded to differences in parts of the EU. So let me pose this question to you so you can bring in your perspective. In both economic and political terms, the EU seems to become more polarized. Maybe one bloc in the northwest, another in the south, and a third very loosely called central and east. I know we can quibble with these separations, but how dangerous are these cleavages for the future of Europe? Can they be mitigated?
Okay, now I believe that one of the key factors for the success of the European project for decades was the fact or the perception that European integration was acting as a convergence machine, which enabled the less developed countries and regions of the European community and then the European Union to gradually catch up with the more developed ones. And this was crucial, and it lasted for decades. Unfortunately, EU as a convergence machine is no longer, and hasn't been for several years. And there's a variety of reasons that may help to explain why this has been so. I believe, because the time is limited, it has to do, of course, with the liberal version of globalization that we lived through for the last 30 years or so. It also has to do with the latest rounds of enlargement, which brought in the European Union countries that relied heavily on low labor costs, flexible labor markets, and low taxation as means of the catching up, the economic catching up process. And this gradually and last but not least, the financial crisis. Because it was the financial crisis that slowed down growth, or rather created negative rates of growth for several years. And on top of it, increased the gap, especially between the North and the South. So indeed, we have experienced splits inside the European Union more than before. There is a North-South split in economic terms. There has been an East-West split, which is more, rather, as you pointed out, Central Eastern Europe versus Northwestern Europe in political and cultural terms. And these are challenges that the European Union has to deal with. Now, Sonia mentioned the European Recovery Fund. This is indeed a game changer, because faced with a pandemic, which is an even bigger problem than the financial crisis in many ways, and different in its own way, the European Union has done what precisely it had refused or was unable to do with the financial crisis, namely to partially neutralize debt, to launch a big investment program with a strong redistributive bias in favor of countries with weaker economies and economies that have been worst hit by the pandemic. So in that respect, the Recovery Fund is a game changer. Now, of course, everything will depend from now on implementation. And this has two stages. The first is that, as we again observe, painfully observe, the European Union may be extremely resilient. It has shown this faced with successive crises, but it is extremely, painfully slow in reaching decisions and implementing them. And then the second stage will be when we move from EU decisions to national plans. So the success of Italy, Greece, Bulgaria, and other countries to implement effectively those recovery programs and use those programs to gradually transform their economies will be the test as to whether this will be a one-off exercise or will be repeated in the future. Because, of course, if it fails, it will give huge opportunities for frugals and others to say, you know, this is a waste of time and money. And perhaps one last word on illiberalism. There, I believe that the European Union should be much more decisive and firm than it has been until now. I mean, tolerating Orban and his relatives for so many years, especially within the European People's Party family, has been too much of a bad thing. And I hope that we have learned lessons from the experience until now. I will stop here.
Okay, thank you, Luca. I think you've all raised a number of interesting points.